we're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. When we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Hey everyone, welcome to Unmute Yourself, another Unmuted Monday. This is the 50th episode of the show. Isn't that wild? I'm so excited about it. I'm really looking forward to introducing all of you to our guest today, somebody who has had a really significant influence on my life, on how I see myself, and has been there at really pivotal moments. And I know that you are going to learn so much from him. I'm going to introduce him in just a moment. But first, I want to welcome everyone who's here. Maria Rouse, so good to see you. I love seeing your name pop up. We've got Brian Schulman. Let us know if you're joining us today. Just drop in the comments maybe where you're joining us from. I'm here in Baltimore, Maryland, ready for the eclipse today. I don't know about anybody else. I need to get the glasses situation figured out, but I live near an elementary school, so I'm sure I can swipe a pair from a kid. So it's so good to have everyone here. To let us know where you're joining us from. This is going to be a really great episode that's going to help give you some clarity and give you some insight about tools that you can use, a book that you can read, that will help you get more clarity around what your strengths are, what your unique genius is, so that you can show up with that more fully in the world. So this is going to be a really, really important episode. And I'm so excited that you're here. Hi, John from Oklahoma. We've got Maria joining us from Sacramento, California. Mike, hey Mike from Cincinnati, Ohio. Good to have you here with us today. I know some of you may be watching the replay after the show is recorded. And by the way, all of the past episodes you can find on my YouTube channel. If you're ever curious for past guests we've talked to, you can go on and just search Unmute Yourself, Rachel Druckenmiller, and you'll be able to see all the past shows. So I just wanted to mention that this episode will be recorded as well and available later. Perfect. And Maria says the eclipse should be available on the NASA website. I didn't know that. So thank you for that little bit of insight, Maria, for anybody who wants to check it out there. So to get started, a couple updates today. One I wanted to share that I haven't shared on here in a while is that I've been working on my book, doing a lot of writing, and my goal is to have the first draft of my manuscript finished by next month, and then have an editorial review and then submit it to the two of the different publishers that I'm talking to. So this book is going to be out next year, 2025. So excited about it. More to come on that. Been working very, very, very hard writing this thing and gathering stories and researching and all kinds of stuff. And I cannot wait to share it with all of you. And I'm so excited for how it's going to impact your life in a positive way. So let's see. So to get started today, what I would like to do is just ask you all a question. We're going to be talking about strengths. We're going to be talking about connecting you to your genius spark. And so to get started, I would love for you to drop in the comments. You can do this in a word, in a couple of words, in a short phrase. But what is a strength that you have? Maybe a strength that you see in yourself, something someone else has pointed out to you. If you've taken an assessment like the Clifton Strengths Assessment from Gallup or another one, and maybe it's told you what your strengths are, feel free to drop that in. But would love to get a conversation going about what is a strength that you have. I think if I were to ask you, what is a way that you're deficient? A lot of us could come up with a laundry list of, well, here's 15 ways that I'm just not cutting it. And that is really easy for us to do because we have that negativity bias in our brain that sends us into that mode most often. But we can make a choice to say, what if I paused for a moment and really looked inside myself and thought about, gosh, when I'm really at my best, what shows up? What strengths emerge? What qualities do I have? What characteristics do I display? What are things other people that I work with, friends of mine, loved ones, family members, coaches have affirmed in me in some way? We often shy away from saying those things because it feels like we're tooting our own horn and we're told not to do that. But I'm going to encourage you to do that today. So to drop in the comments, what is a strength that you have? A strength that you see in yourself, something that somebody else has called out in you. And maybe even in a specific word. So I might say a strength that I have is perseverance, right? I am somebody who does not give up easily, no matter what knocks me down, that I have this ability to keep going. And I would also say another strength is curiosity. I wonder about a lot of things. I ask a lot of questions. I wonder about myself. I wonder about the world. I wonder about other people. I wonder about how we can make things better. Wonder how we can optimize things. So those are some strengths I would say. Joe, good to have you here. Problem solving and strategic planning. Mike has a strength of empathy. And I agree, Maria, it can be something that's physical, mental, emotional, and often maybe something that you think you can't do, but you are able to do it. So feel free to drop in any others that come to mind, any other strengths that you have. This is a really good exercise for us to do just on a fairly consistent basis because most of us don't, because we feel bad about doing it or we're told we're not supposed to. But my encouragement for you is unmute yourself, celebrate your strengths, stand firm in them, and don't apologize for them. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to our guest today. And this is somebody that I met it started as a LinkedIn message. I think it was in 2017, I want to say. And he reached out through a mutual friend of ours connection, Mim Sempt, and said he was writing a book and thought that the story of my organization and what we were doing around workplace culture and well-being was something that he wanted to learn more about. And so we connected through that and we stayed connected. I had the opportunity to then meet him at a conference he was speaking at several months later. And shortly after that conference, he sent me an email that said something that has stuck with me in a way that very few things have stuck with me. Words of affirmation are a real big appreciation language of mine. And he sent me a message that said, "You're a catalyst who unleashes what's possible." And sometimes we need people to see something in us and to name it in a really specific way. And that can literally change how we see ourselves. And so he gave me such a gift in that. And then we were able to stay connected through a mastermind community. And he was just somebody who was so kind and gracious and generous with his time, with his knowledge, with his network. And I am very grateful to know this person, which is why I'm so excited for you to meet him. So I want you to meet Rex Miller. He's a transformative leader with 40 years of corporate management and executive experience, and is the founder of Mind Shift. Rex is renowned for his innovative approach to problem solving, known as the Mind Shift process. His unique blend of experiences, including a master's degree in strategic foresight and a background as a certified tennis professional, enables him to guide leaders to unlock hidden potential. His client list includes a wide array of organizations you've heard of, including Google, Facebook, and the Federal Reserve Bank. He's also the author of The Genius Spark, and that's a program that helps individuals discover their full potential. So I want you to help me give a warm, unmuted welcome to Rex Miller, everybody.
All right.
Hi.
Thank you. Wow. Just the opening is so inspiring. And so I've got what I need, so I'm ready to go.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's so great to have you here. And tell us where you're joining us from, because where you're joining us from is a really cool place.
Yeah. So it's a little ranch about an hour and a half south of Dallas called Glen Rose. And the name of the place is River Rose. We're on the Paluxy River. I'm pointing to it over there. I've got a little cabin. We're in a historic property. This cabin was built about 80 years ago. And we've got a house built out of petrified wood and fossils because we're the dinosaur capital of Texas. and we're smack dab in the middle of the solar eclipse. So it's a beautiful place. Um, Springtime, we've got bluebonnets, acres and acres of bluebonnets and Indian paintbrushes all through the pastures that we've got. So it's great. It's just a great place to be.
That's awesome. I still need to make my way there. It's going to happen at some
We,
point.
we have a guest house. We reserve it, no charge for friends and people looking to get some solace and retreat.
Okay. Well, this is good to know. I need to talk to Bill about this, and because I would absolutely. I know I need to come. I've heard so many things about it. I've seen pictures. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah, right.
I need to make it there. And we have a quick question that's been asked about. Yes, this will be recorded, Kelly. And so don't worry. You can go back and stay for as long as you can while we're live, and then you can catch the recording after. And the benefit about being here for when it's live is if you have questions, you can drop them in, and we'll do our best to answer them. So. Rex, to get started, it's interesting. Of all the conversations we haven't had the conversation we're about to have. And so I'm very curious because I know I'm going to learn something new about you. And I would love for you to tell us about a time in your life, your work, you decide whatever aspect of your life this connects to, where you have muted yourself or felt muted in some way, and the journey that you went on to get unmuted, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, well, the journey that brought me here today started in 2000. Um, I accepted a position as a vice president for an office furniture distributor in Texas. Now, I had been in Texas before. I knew the owner. We had been in Virginia for 10 years. So it was 1999 when we moved our young family back to Texas just in time for the dot-com crash. And I thought I had built the platform to do everything I thought I needed to do or wanted to do. Retire in 10 years, provide a great income and great experience for the family, reconnect with old friends, all of that. But within about 9 months, it all disappeared. Our revenue dropped 70%. One day I come into the workplace and my email, now, internet was not a real big thing back in 2000. It was email and it wasn't working. I thought it was a technical issue and it wasn't. So the tech guy, Walt, said, go talk to the owner, which I did. And he'd been a friend since 1978. But this conversation he was having with me was not one he was looking forward to. So he ripped up my contract, said, you've got two choices. You can either leave today or come back as a commission salesperson on Monday. What that meant was my whole life had just gotten turned upside down with a new mortgage, just moving family. I was $150,000 of credit card debt within a few months. I'm 50 pounds heavier than I am today. Stressed, not a good dad, not a good husband. And then this book comes out in 2000 called Now Discover Your Strengths. So I read that book and thought, wow, I am what I would call successfully normal. Uh, you know, I'm successful, not passionate, not really doing things the way I would naturally do them, not doing what I love to do. So it just started a whole rebuilding process: physical health, mental health, family relationships, economic. And it took 6, 7 years to get to a place where I was doing what I love to do and do best, and built the bridge out of that company in 2007. And now we're doing what I'm doing today, which is basically helping people find that spark, the thing that they've kind of sat upon, snuffed out. It's very similar to what you've been doing with people, helping them find their voice. And I remember watching you really coming into your own, when you were starting the ahas, finding that surge of energy when you did something, got in front of an audience and just came alive, saw the responses and that cycle. And, you've catapulted. I remember a December when we were together with this small little mastermind group and you had started your own business, and, it it all the uncertainty and this COVID thing and what were we going to do? and that perseverance comes time and time again. And so the key, the key for me is just being true to my story, not trying to be somebody else, not trying to do things in a different way, and being what I call significant to a few instead of being marginal to many. So
Mm,
that's been my journey. Is I'm wired to build deep long-term relationships where we can have a significant impact with each other, not try to, you know, curry to the masses, so to speak.
mhm,
Now, from a business standpoint, I do reach to the masses, but it's basically to pull out the few. So
mm,
instead of I fish with a net, and then I pick out the ones where it's going to take and it's going to be a long-term relationship.
mm,
So that's my kind of comeback story. And again, I'm 69 this year. I'm healthier than I've been, golly, in decades. Um, we bought off more than we could chew with this ranch, started a software company, published a book, and I feel like, you know, I'm a late bloomer, and it's just, the momentum is just starting to pick up now.
I love that. There's what you just shared reminds me of a quote that my dad, I think he has it on his wall. It's Satchel Paige quote.
Oh,
How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
right. Yeah, and so, the interesting thing is when you have a long term, you prepare for the long term.
Mm,
Too many people are thinking I'm going to retire when I'm 65, and the numbers are pretty clear. Those people don't live very much longer because they lose their purpose and their energy. The key is, for me, is to make sure what I do for a living is also part of who I am and what I
mm,
love to do, and that it's part of my purpose.
mhm.
And that way, you know, it's yeah, it's effort, right? It's
Yeah,
work, but you
yeah,
love what you do, and I'm sure now you're a little bit younger, and so, but your runway is as long as you can keep the chassis and together, that's how long the runway can be.
yeah. No, it's true. And when you're doing things that make you feel really good, you're like, oh, let me just keep doing this. This is great. And when I think about your journey of discovering this book over 20 years ago, when do you think of it when you first started to notice a shift happening inside of yourself, and like, what did that shift look like or feel like?
It's interesting. I think when the first book came out in 2004, so I'm what you might consider to be an accidental author. I was speaking about generational conflict and challenges in the early 2000s, but I had a very different lens. And so when I get up to speak, and you may do the same, I'm testing, does this resonate?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it obviously resonated with somebody because they asked me if I would be open to writing a book on it. And I said, I have no clue how to write a book. And so I went to a write a book conference, which is a weird place to go. You've got people who want to write books about cat dreams and stuff like that. And I thought, what am I doing here? But I had, those divine moments where one person I sat to lunch with, and he was the editor of a magazine. He said, look, all you need to do is write a book proposal. Start there. And when he described it, it's basically a business plan
Mm,
for a book. I said, I can do that. So I did. We got an author. It was Josie Bass. They're a good author, or a good publisher. And that when I got through that, I said, I can do that.
mm,
And then the next hurdle was getting up to speak in front of people. Um, I have a speech impediment, and most people don't realize that because over time, I have a particular style of presenting and the way I do it that doesn't take me down those roads while I get stuck or stutter.
mm,
Um, and so that was another nerve wracking thing for a while until you get some experience. And so these are all mountains. I like to make the analogy mountains to climb.
yeah.
And I'm a Boy Scout. So mountains can be rigorous, but when you get up to the peak, then you say, I'm ready for the next one and ready to go.
Yeah.
So I think 2004 was when it clicked and said, okay, I don't have to be in the corporate world. I can do something different.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And look what you've done. I mean, you've taken off. It's been really amazing to watch. And one of your books I have right here, This Is How We Connected, is this
Oh yeah.
book, The Healthy
Right.
Workplace
Uh-huh.
Nudge.
Yeah. And you're in that book. Your,
Yeah, you did a,
your
well,
cartoon image is in there.
Michael Lagaki, the good,
Yeah. Yeah.
wonderful artist.
Right.
First time I've been cartoonified. I don't even know if that's a word, but it was, I think that's part of it too. I think the way that you write your books is you invite other people to unmute themselves because
Yeah.
of the invitation to
Right.
share stories. It's a very collaborative approach to writing a book that I
Yeah.
think is a
It's a
little
very
different.
unique research and writing approach.
Mm-hmm. And it was really cool to be a
Yeah.
part of it and to sort of witness that all coming together. I'm
Well,
curious.
and
Yeah.
that goes, that goes to one of, so we use the Clifton Strengths, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people write books differently. But what works for me is that I bring people together to go down journeys of discovery and debate. And I have a strength called connectedness. So what I love to do is find the thread between lots of people's stories and the insights and the research. And so that's my style. And again, that's being true to how I'm wired to write a book. If I had to just sit down by myself and, write a book, that would be an effort. But when I'm with a group of people, then it feels like it comes alive to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it creates its own, there's something that emerges that wasn't there before the group came together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
It's pretty cool. So thinking through, I mean, all the work that you've done, you're the one that really got me more into Clifton Strengths because I had
Mhm.
taken the assessment shortly after we met, I think, when I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
in the midst of burnout.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to go through that experience and take this assessment where I was in a corporate job I didn't really love. I mean, I liked parts of it, but it just
Right.
wasn't
Right.
as
It was
fulfilling
clear.
as
Yeah, that was clear. Right.
working for myself is.
Right.
And I feel like I learned a lot of insight from you. So I'm curious. Tell us just. I know there's some people here that are familiar with the Clifton Strengths, and so I guess tell us about what your strengths are and what you see in the work that you're doing with organizations and teams and leaders. What are you seeing are the main ways that people are sort of muting their strengths, silencing themselves, holding themselves up back at work? Like, take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah. Well, I'll go back before the whole Clifton Strengths. There's two great TED Talks. One is for Ken Robinson's 2005 TED Talk that says, "Our School's Killing Creativity,"
Mm.
which was based on research from George Land, who, and both have passed away. But George Land developed an assessment for NASA called the Imaginative Index for the space program. And it was designed to pick the best and brightest. And, so here's a coffee mug. The assessment was very simple. How many uses can you think of this mug?
Mm.
And they would measure the number, the quantity, the novelty, and the practicality, and come up with a rating score. It was so simple that he asked himself, I wonder what kids would do with it, how they would take it. So this is back in the 60s. He gave it to 1,600 kids in the Head Start program. And if you've got people overseas, the Head Start program is a program for at-risk kids that was developed in the 1960s. To his astonishment, 98% of them tested as geniuses. So this is where the muting comes in.
Mm.
5 years later, it drops from 98% to 30%. 5 years later, at age 15, it drops to 12%. And then when you get to 30, it's only 2% maintain or have sustained the attributes that allow them to be fully themselves and that full creativity.
Hmm.
So George Land has a book and he goes through the process. And we all know the process, right? The process. We go to school and what do we have to do? We have to sit still and listen and take tests. And we're all lumped together by age, not by creativity or curiosity. And then you take standardized tests and you're socialized, if you're the odd person in, when you hit middle school, and if you're a little bit odd in any way, it is brutal.
Mhm.
So you learn how to either shut it down or fit in or do whatever. And I don't think I was any different in that. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to
Yeah.
be part of the groups. And then there's the process of picking a major, and you're thinking of, this is what I'd love to do, but can I make a living? And then you go to what can I make a living at? So now you've muted yourself one more time, or that spark
Mhm.
has died a little bit more. So I've spent the last 25 plus years studying geniuses. What are those qualities? And there are some in that category of maybe the savant side of things.
Mhm.
But for most of us, the majority of us, it's there.
Mhm.
And so Walt Disney, one of my hero figures, he says the more you are like yourself, the less you are like anyone else, which makes you unique.
Mhm.
Now, I was fortunate to have exposure to a protege of his, Michael Vance, who was dean of Disney University and also one of the creators of Epcot. And he would go on to say that nobody wants to go to kind of like Disney. So that's that unique factor. In Walt Disney would also say the problem we have today is we have too many copies and not enough originals. Now, the question and the challenge that hits is usually that disconnect hits somewhere when somebody hits 40 to 60.
Mm.
And that's when it hit me, 45, right?
Mm.
I had built my ladder of success, but I'd put it up on the wrong wall. So when I'm coaching, I'm finding all these career successful people who feel trapped
Mhm.
because they have a lifestyle, right? And they have a passion, and they don't know how to build the bridge from where they are to where they would like to be. So they give in, in the movie The Matrix. I don't know if you remember the scene where Morpheus holds two pills out.
Mm.
There's the red pill and the blue pill.
Mhm.
The blue pill, if you take the blue pill, you go back to your life and you don't remember anything about a future adventure. You just go back to, the grind, the treadmill. The red pill is the adventure pill, which you took, right?
Mm.
All that uncertainty, that's the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the challenge. So when I work with people, and what the reason I like the Clifton Strengths is that it's measuring your brain. It's not a personality assessment. It's measuring the parts of your brain that fire the fastest and most instinctive, and then learning how to connect that with what you experience in life, and then how to develop it and build it from a gut level instinct into a mastered skill. How do you master yourself? The challenge I run into with most people is they get excited, they see the potential, and then they take the blue pill
Mm.
because they don't get from where I am to. And the challenge is you don't know what that future is going to look like. You have no clue.
Mm.
It is a leap of I've got to trust that whatever this thing is inside of me, with a guide. Every movie hero's got a guide someplace. You need a guide. Very few people can do it uh, just on their own. And that's the challenge, is that the tension between I've got this stable thing that I know and can predict, but I've got all this potential and these dreams and the energy here that I'm willing, and when you look back, right,
Mhm.
you think, why didn't I do this sooner? What was holding me back? And that's what people can't see. They can't see that they're being held back, and that the leap is actually safer than just holding on to something that is stealing your soul
Mhm.
day in and day out. And some people are walking dead. They there's nothing inspiring. They go to the next day, and it's just heartbreaking to watch. Oh, they were so close. They saw it. They had a glimpse of it, and then you just don't hear from them anymore, and they go back to the way it was.
Yeah. It's like they're counting down. I remember it was really 8 years ago. I was attending an HR conference. I wasn't speaking yet at these events. And I sat in the back of the room, and there was a guy at the front who was asking people to share, like, write down their biggest dreams of what they were. And mine was like, start a business, do a TED Talk, write a book, like a best-selling book, not just write a book, write a best-selling book. I'm like, I don't know how old I was, 28 or something, 29. And I remember he was getting people to share their responses. And somebody in the front of the room raised their hand. And they, with all seriousness, said, like, their biggest goal and their biggest dream was retirement.
Ugh.
And I remember there was like a part of me that felt so crushed by thinking, like, what have we done to work to make it so awful that the people's biggest dream is to basically not have to work?
Yeah, right.
Like,
well,
it just broke my heart.
Yeah, and work has its own built-in soul-sucking dynamics.
It does.
But if when you help somebody kind of get their voice, unmute, when I help somebody find their spark, the circumstances don't have to get better.
Right.
You get better, and the situation helps you go deeper into who you naturally are and how you naturally live. So, my situation didn't change for 7 years. I mean, I was in debt, scared, but I was slowly getting better and enjoying what I was doing because I was doing it through how I was wired to do it, that genius spark in me.
Your perspective. It's like the lens through which you were looking at
totally
the situation.
Totally changed. Yeah. I was doing it for completely different reasons. I wasn't doing it out of fear of financial security. I wasn't doing it because, I didn't know anything else to do. I was doing it because I was being pulled forward by a future vision and becoming more like that every day, a little bit more like that every day.
Yeah, that compelling vision. I want to talk about that in a minute. And there was something that you brought up in what you just shared that reminded me of something a therapist said to me in 2018. So shortly after we met.
Yeah.
This was a year after I burned out, a year before I left my job. And I had taken an assessment called the Harrison assessment.
Okay.
Which I'd never heard of before. And I've never heard it mentioned since. But it looks at sort of like motivations and drives around work and like what people's needs are and expectations of their job. And I took this assessment and I walked into her office to get the results back. And she said, after reviewing your results, I'm trying to understand how you are possibly working for someone else. That's the first thing she said. Just kind of wrap my head around it because you're like highly self-motivated and you don't need a lot of, whatever the things are that people usually need from a boss. And like, you just kind of want to be a self-operating machine and be left alone. And she said, but I looked at this one aspect of your assessment and I think this will resonate with, I'm hoping it resonates with a lot of people, that she said, I know why you haven't made the move yet. And the reason is because your ability to assess risk is greater than your ability to trust yourself.
Whoa, that'll get you. Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's that holdback thing. Yeah. Well, and even in your strengths, Clifton strengths, we've got an archetype pattern and you are called the pioneer. That's your pattern. The person who's a trailblazer, that pioneer person who likes to be in the leading edge or out on their own. But like you said, there are things that keep us tethered and that trust in us. And that's part of it. That's, again, the red pill, blue pill choice. You don't feel ready to trust the uncertainty or trust yourself. Yeah. And a lot of that is, there's something in positive psychology called learned helplessness. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but Dr. Martin Seligman. And it's hard to retrain that out of you. And so that's why you need support, communities of support, people who can help you move around this. The other thing too, and I want to make sure I give something practical to your audience, any of the assessments, if you take any of them, just go through them and underline the sentences that resonate. Because they're algorithmic and they're not personalized. They can be spooky close in terms of how they describe you. But sports science now says that it's not the information that's going to help you transform, it's the picture you create.
Mm.
So if you underline those sentences, pull them out, and you say these are the ones that really I identify with most, turn them into a paragraph, a portrait of what you look like at your best, and then just begin to reinforce it. I read mine every day. I read mine this morning. I've got a
Can you read
different.
it to us? Would you mind doing that?
Sure.
I would like people to
Yeah, yeah,
hear.
yeah.
I mean, I have
Let me
mine
pull it
pulled
up.
up because I just wanted to have it available too.
Yeah, and I've got
Yeah.
one for every day of the week. Uh,
Oh.
that's the value of ChatGPT now. I can write it in different voices and different form. I've got one that's spoken word. I've got
Wow,
one
that's
that
so cool.
I've got one that is a professional coach talking to me, like I'm in a locker room, said, okay, Rex, here's what you got to prepare for.
Oh, I love this.
Those are important because you that picture you create in your brain will move towards the picture you reinforce and that you want. So my
Mm.
Monday one is this. Uh, I am a leader who bears God's image and serves him daily. I am a pathfinder, seeking new ways to improve myself and those around me. I am a modern elder who offers guidance and insight to those seeking help. I seek patterns that reveal systems and structures to provide new order, stability, and meaning. I scale mountains, constantly pushing myself to new heights and overcoming obstacles. I protect the brotherhood, fostering a sense of unity and camaraderie within the circle of my influence. I build communities that unite people to create a sense of belonging. And finally, I orchestrate and guide teams to achieve common goals. And and then I've turned it into kind of headlines, God's servant, image bearer, pathfinder, wisdom provider, trusted advisor, etc.
Mm. And what does it
But
do for you when you notice? So tell us a bit of the psychology
yeah,
of reading that to your reading that, starting your day by doing like what is the benefit? Because most people don't do something like that. And so
well,
tell us what the benefit of doing that is.
yeah. So you can go online to YouTube and watch how Michael Phelps visualizes or imagines performance. So let's assume that picture is a performance criteria for your day. I want to show up like this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now reinforcing what that performance is, instead of saying I want to do a 2-minute, 200-yard, whatever, my performance is to show up like that.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next thing I do is I just look at my calendar, and guess what? One of my calendar events is a time with Rachel. So I will ask myself a question. It's called opening a narrative loop. How will I show up at my best with Rachel?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the day, I will reflect. How did I show up? So, was I present? Was I engaged? Did I prepare? All those things. And the final part of it, when I reflect in the end of the day, I will remember the highlight moments, the energized moments of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I will recall it and then look at the paragraph and say, what part of that came alive?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a couple pieces of psychology here. One, of course, is performance science. Mental simulation, visualization, whatever it is, your brain, it's called the reticular activator. You're activating a part of your brain where your brain now filters out distraction to that and filters in the things that reinforce it. The other thing, it's a little bit of cognitive behavior therapy. And what cognitive behavior therapy does is it replaces the narrative in your mind that is not working for you with a narrative that helps you accomplish what you want. And the other part too is what we call compounded gains. It's a Darren Hardy concept where little bits every day. So everything I just did takes as much time as we just did here. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the key is regularity or consistency with it.
Mm-hmm.
That takes time, and you need to give yourself grace and forgiveness. Like last night, I got in at 10:30 at night. We had just gotten home from 3 weeks on the road in Amsterdam. Saturday, had our grandson all day yesterday. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to bed. And so life is life, but again, I promise you, you keep telling your brain a little bit of this. And then George Land in his book here, The Hidden Powers of Nature, is showing how the creative process is a universal thing, whether it's in nature or within yourself, in terms of, you know, just that reinforcement of the picture of that future, and that future pulls you forward.
Yeah.
Now, your future can just be the day, or your
Mm-hmm.
future can be long term.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's more important to think through the process as well. What does this do the steps of the day look like? If you're just picturing the future, that gets you started, but it doesn't get you there. So you
Mm-hmm.
have to do a little bit of imagining, well, how am I going to show up at my best with Rachel today?
Yeah, I think that's an important question anyone could ask themselves stepping into a conversation right before you
Yeah,
pick up the phone to call somebody,
right.
before you meet someone for coffee or lunch, before you text somebody. I mean, how often do people have any thought or pause
Oh,
before
of
they
course.
send a text to somebody? You know?
Now, the piece you want to add to that is it's got to be based on what? So we can ask ourselves, how am I going to show up at my best? But if you haven't thought or reflected what that best is,
Yeah,
it's just wishful thinking.
right.
There's nothing to give it some guidance.
You have to do it. You have to do a bit of digging first and kind of unearthing. And I mean, you helped me do that with those things where we did the first. I remember I
Yeah.
still have the first paragraph that we wrote
Oh, no kidding.
five
Yeah.
or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you helped me write. And it was based on what my strengths. They've shifted a little bit. So tell us your top 5 Clifton strengths.
So strategic, learner, achiever, connectedness, and relator.
Okay, and tell us what some of those, maybe in a sentence or two, like what
So
each of those means.
yeah, so strategic allows me to pick a direction instinctively, and it'll be pretty spot on, like a
Mm,
GPS does. Here's
mm,
where I want to go. It cuts through the clutter. 5,000-foot view. That's the good place to go, and then it navigates backward like a GPS system.
okay.
Learner is that curiosity, open. I've got thousands of things I'm listening to all the time. Always listening to something new. The achiever is probably the one that gets overworked.
Mm-hmm.
That's the get it done, the drive, the looking for the challenge, sense of accomplishment. The underlying driver is that sense of accomplishments. That's why checklists are so valuable. Checklists are like a dog treat to a dog. It's an endorphin, it's a dopamine hit.
Mm-hmm.
Then the connectedness is the one that popped up after the pandemic. It wasn't far down, but it's one that I've just loved getting to know and appreciate more and more. It's that ability to find the common thread behind lots of things that look disparate,
Hmm.
and find that synthesis or that common thread, and to be able to go places in thought or with people, having that hunch about somebody, which when I'm live with somebody, I can go into their lives and just I can uncover things that they feel, whoa, how did you know that? And that's part of that connectedness, looking at the pattern, putting it together, and then going with that hunch. But
Mm-hmm.
the hunch comes because of practice and practice and practice, and you
Mm-hmm.
trust it. And then finally, the relator is that I'm more comfortable with a few people that I can go deep with
Mm-hmm.
than lots of people. And
Yeah.
that again goes back to my community building versus, just trying to shotgun and
Mm-hmm.
spread out what I do amongst lots of people.
That that makes a lot of sense. I think that comes out too um, in my husband. He has harmony
Ah,
as
yeah.
his top one, and then he's restorative and developer and relator, and he's an elementary and middle school teacher. Big
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
surprise,
Yeah,
right?
lots of patience, can
Yeah,
read people well, find out where there's misalignment. He probably can read through the kids what's going on in the family.
yeah. if something's off, he can pick up on it. And
Yeah.
it's a gift, it's like we need more teachers who are that
Well,
perceptive and who want
and
to
you
pick up
guys are
too.
such a great balance too. You know,
Yeah.
so there's two kinds of forces. There's people who create chaos and change, and there's those who restore order and healing. So you guys have the great combination.
Yeah, we're quite a balance based on those two things. And like, I found it helpful to go through. I think when I first created the paragraph that I did, a lot of it was based on kind of pulling out those key sentences after I
Hmm.
took like the Clifton Strengths, the Strengths Finder
Yeah,
book, right? I did the assessment
right.
in the back of it. And that's how I first got access to it. And then you did one of those magic tricks on me where you were like, oh, this is your sort of, archetype of like this, pioneer type thing. And I was reading through it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so spot on, and you feel almost like eerily seen.
Right. Yeah.
And then you feel like you can lean into that more because it's like, oh, this isn't just a fluky thing that I'm aware of. Like this is a thing, and there's language around it, and it gives you a certain level of confidence to be able to your point about sort of the cognitive behavioral aspect of doing something like this. It's you're rewriting a narrative because so many of us have negative narratives that
So
predominate.
true. Right.
You know?
Well, and there's so because they're so wired and instinctive, there's two elements to it. There's a magic side. Whoa, what's that?
I don't know, a balloon. I
Yeah.
don't know why I did that.
And now it's frozen.
There it goes.
So there's a magic side to it.
Uh-huh.
And one of my kind of working definitions for genius is what's natural to you but looks like magic to me. That's the genius.
Mm.
And there's a survival side to all of them. Remember, this is the survival gear your brain has. So that magic side is a progression. And a lot of people will know their strengths, but not rely on them instinctively.
Mm.
So, that's that level of unconscious incompetence. I don't know what I don't know. But then you take the assessment. Now I know what these are. And then you go through a period of time of understanding and learning. Then it's conscious competence.
Mm-hmm.
So you get above the line. But the mastery level is when you're really relying on those top strengths. And it's, it can go down to your 7 or 8 strengths. Typically, the top 5 are the ones. But where I see the biggest gain for people that I work with who are very competent
Mm-hmm.
is there's things that they sit on. This is the muted thing. Like I work with construction project teams.
Mm.
And one of the first questions I ask, have you ever been on a bad project? Everybody's hand raised up. And I said, how early in the project did your gut tell you that something wasn't right? Guess what they say? First meeting, first month or so. And I said, did you say anything? No, that's the muted, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, so let's look at what you felt. And then we tie it back to their wiring and their strengths. So yours was you sense BS from somebody. Well, you've got relator.
Mm-hmm.
That's the survival side. Or you sense that there were unrealistic expectations on timelines. Well, you've got achiever. You know what it takes to get things done, but you didn't say anything. Now you know that if you develop it, you can save yourself 6 months, 8 months of whatever it is.
Yeah.
So again, the muting, we so censor ourselves in so many situations. And a lot of it is just lack of knowledge and lack of practice.
Yeah. Well, and I see the thing that happens a lot too is like I'm so curious. I've never asked you about this before, but I'm curious about the connection between the strengths that we have and maybe even like our emotional intelligence or even emotional awareness, self-awareness, because a lot of times there's people that are bringing stuff like all of us had something that didn't go right when we were kids that affects the way we show up as adults. Like nobody got out of, my dad says, nobody got out of childhood unscathed. Like everybody has a thing,
Right.
that happened that affects how you show up. And most people never do the work to figure out maybe what that is, or even if you can't figure out what it is or why it is, how they might want to show up in a different way to have some responsibility as an adult and say,
Yeah,
okay,
right,
well,
right.
this thing I'm doing is not really working. It's ineffective. I'm curious, does a story stand out to you about, obviously without breaching confidentiality, but like a story stand out to you about someone or a group that you've worked with that you saw this almost like awakening happen and you saw like a drastic and notable shift in their behavior as a
Oh,
result of understanding themselves
huge.
better.
Yeah, it's actually the very first strengths workshop I did, and it was with the FAA,
Mm.
and it was rated so low in Gallup that they wanted a workshop. And I
Mm.
looked at their strengths and I thought, oh my gosh, there are so many strengths that are on the kind of skepticism, uh, this won't work kind of troubleshooting side of the equation. And I asked our senior partner, I said, either this group has worked a lot together and trust each other, or it's toxic. And he said, well, it's one of the most toxic ones. So in the book, there's a story of Bob. And Bob was a guy in the workshop who sat in the back with his arms folded and sat back, wouldn't even look up. And in that first workshop, excuse me there, it opened up by saying, do we need someone like you to fix us? What I didn't know is that the air traffic officer told them, you're going to go and meet with this consultant and come back in 4 days and get fixed. It was one of the lowest ranked groups in the whole in the whole system.
Mm.
Then another one said, we don't believe in any of this fuzzy wuzzy horoscopy kumbaya psychobabble bullshit. Um, and then and and so these are engineers, ex-military, tough group. Well, Bob was sitting in the back and didn't say a word. And at lunchtime, I went to lunch with him with a colleague from the same consulting firm. And I said, Bob, I said, so what do you get to do during the week that energizes you? He says, nothing, just 2 words, not a thing. And then I'm going, well, thinking maybe he does something after. And I said, well, what do you do after work? And he says, nothing.
Mm.
And we're 2 minutes into an hour lunch, and I have no idea where to take the conversation. And I go, how long has this been going on? He says, 25 years. I hate my job. I hate the people I work with. And I'm going, now I'm definitely feeling I'm in way over my head. This is therapy, and I'm not prepared for that. And I just looked at him. I said, Bob, just paint a picture for me for the next 5 years. If nothing changes, where is this going? Health, happiness, career. And he just shook his head and he dropped his head. And fortunately, my colleague, who is a Jungian psychologist, picked up the conversation. We got back. Next 3 days, not much moved with Bob. 90 days later, I come back. He's smiling and he greets me. And I go, this is freaky. I'm not sure what's up with this. And before we get started, he says, I have something I need to tell everybody. And in tears, he's saying, I've been an SOB for 25 years and I never understood why. This is the best group I've ever worked with. And everybody was getting emotional because he'd been he's been the jackass on the team for 25 years. So I said, let's take a time out. I had to get recomposed. I went to the executive officer and I said, Dave, what just happened here? And he said, well, I don't know what conversation you had with him at lunch, but he came back to me and said, I think I know what's wrong. I need to talk to you. Well, his boss moved him into a new role. Now, this is somebody who had none of the people strengths. And his job for 25 years was dealing with young, entitled high school grads that were making over 100,000 that were part of a union. So you can see how he wasn't equipped, draining every day, and that drain goes into toxic. Well, now he's in research and development. 90 days, his life changed.
Mm.
There are 4 other people in that workshop whose lives changed that dramatically in other areas as well. Now, that was 20 years ago. I have never been in a workshop. That's kind of your rookie good luck. My very first workshop, I was in over my head, didn't know what to do. Life changing. It changed my career because once the whole agency learned about what had happened and the performance turnaround, we were just busy. And Kurt Andre,
Hmm.
It was Kurt's account. I
Mm.
was working with him. We worked with over 3,500 people in 3 years.
Wow.
So yes, it can make that much of a change.
Hmm.
Just knowing who you are and what you're meant to do, and seeing how do I realign that with circumstances. Now, it took his boss, who knew and was in the workshop, who knew what was going on and why, to make that decision and know
Yeah.
where to put him.
Hmm.
You can imagine that Bob could have gone back into the old situation. The boss would not have known, nothing would have changed. Now, Bob may have known what what really, started getting an understanding of why he is so angry and drained, and either left or done something different.
Yeah.
But, it just was a miracle of circumstances coming together.
Mm. And those are the moments that like make you feel like, gosh, I'm so clear on who I'm helping and why it matters, because look at and then the ripple effects on everybody else that has to work with him or interact with him. And
Yeah.
I
It was a
mean,
career changing, I was a new senior partner. They had never tried this system before. I had never
mm,
done a full workshop. It was designed for 2 days. This was a 4-day workshop.
mm,
I just said it was just the agency at the end of the year had to spend the money. All
yeah,
the other principals were taken, so they just threw me in. They gave me a babysitter, another senior partner who was a union psychologist, in, in case I got in trouble. And it just, you know,
it worked.
those are the moments you don't know, you don't prepare, but unless you take the red pill,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to have those moments.
Yeah. So I want to make sure we have time to hear a bit more about how people can learn more about this. But I
Yeah.
know because you're such like a ninja with this. John on here mentioned, he said, this caused me to pull out the Strengths Finder I took back in 2009.
Oh,
So interesting. He mentioned 4 of his: arranger, consistency, relator, responsibility. If you could, without knowing John, if you could give like a 30-second, 40-second assessment or sense of what might be helpful for him to know based on that, or if
yeah,
you want to
yeah.
affirm anything, tell us.
Well,
Figure magic.
so he probably doesn't sleep well because he worries a lot at night because he's got a high sense of ownership. I'm assuming that his routine and pattern in the morning is pretty, predictable. He's got a very predictable pattern. I'm also assuming that fairness, treating people equitably, and when people don't get treated well, it bothers him. He's got a great bullshit meter, so he can sense when people are not genuine, and also high sense, you know, just a tremendous work ethic. So if I was working with John and said, I'll have this to you by Friday at noon, I better have it Friday at noon, or a good reason why, or else I might get voted off his island. He's got 2 of those. You're either on the island or off the island, like meet the Fockers kind of strengths. So, John, does that resonate with
Yeah,
you?
let us know, John. He said he didn't take the red pill till 2013, as an aside. But John,
Yeah.
let us know. He just moved from living around here to going to Oklahoma
Well, I
to be
would
closer to
say
family.
anybody who feels they may be a little bit different and took it before the pandemic, I would recommend retaking it. Normally, I wouldn't have done that, but I've seen so many people, because of the amount of disruption and upheaval that's taken place, that it's changed dramatically.
Yeah, John goes, dang, so good.
Good.
So
Well,
thanks
I
for
love
that
doing that.
one.
I can do that all day long. You just tell me your 5 strengths. I can tell you what you eat for dinner.
I love it. I love it. You did that with me, and mine changed. My top 2 stayed the same, but
Yeah.
my 3, 4, 5
Yeah. Yeah.
changed pretty significantly. But it's like, well, I took it one time in the midst of burnout and a corporate job, and then I
Yeah.
took
Yeah.
it a year later after
Right.
a car accident, a pandemic, and starting my
Yeah.
own business. I'm like, those are 2 different people.
Right. Right. They are. They are. Yeah.
Those are different. So how can people learn more? So tell us about where they can get the book, where they can
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
about this,
So
and how they can work
here's
with
a
you.
copy of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so a couple places. Amazon has it, of course, but if you buy it off my website, it's less than Amazon, and I sign it and send it to you. So you can go to rexmiller.com, go to the products section, and there's an offer there. LinkedIn, I like you, that's my main area. So if you want to know what I'm doing regularly, LinkedIn is a good place. And those are two easiest places to connect with me.
Yeah. And if someone wanted to work with you for the organization from a coaching perspective, the
Yeah.
best way to do that, contact you through your website. Tell us more about
Yeah.
that.
Contact me
Yeah.
through the website or LinkedIn. Just send me a note
Mhm.
on LinkedIn. Most of my work is dealing with, I like to say, I help leaders learn how to play well in the sandbox, or I provide adult supervision when they can't. And I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah. You're very, very perceptive, very intuitive, very insightful, very discerning, um, very
Yeah, but
kind, wise.
empathy is number 34 for me. Just
Oh,
remember that.
well, harmony is number 34 for me. So,
There you go. Yeah, that's
so
great.
at least I got a husband who has it way on the other end.
Yeah, yeah.
Rex, is there any last thing when you think about that you'd want to leave everyone with? Any final thought when you think about maybe the ways that people have let their spark die? Any words of wisdom or insight you'd want to leave them with as they think about how to bring that back to life?
Just get curious again and start remembering those early days. Remember when you were a kid and the things that energized you, that came easy, that people recognized you for. Just start getting the spark back again, and then take the journey, whether it's Clifton Strengths or some other assessment, or get a copy of the book, and it'll guide you through whatever assessment you take on how to get that paragraph, that picture of who you are at your best.
There you go. Love it. Rex, thank you for your time today. I
Yeah, thank you,
really,
Rachel. It's great to catch up.
yeah, wonderful. And thanks for all that you do. Thanks for what you've done for me. I feel like the source of insight and guidance and support and encouragement you've been for me in some really difficult seasons and some very
Mm,
transitional times in my
Thank
life.
you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'm tremendously
Yeah.
grateful. And
It's all divine appointment.
yeah, it is, and I feel that, and
Yeah.
I'm really, really, really grateful. So thank you for being with us today, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're gonna
Yeah.
be
Thank you,
back
guys. Yeah.
in May with Leslie Wyrick as our guest, who focuses on mental health, especially men's mental health, and focusing
Mm,
on the aspect of
Fascinating.
grief. She has a pretty powerful story. So anyway, thank you again, Rex, for being here, and everybody have a fantastic week. And I'll see you online. Bye,
Okay.
everyone.